The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Wednesday night, and you know what that means. It means we're going to be talking about some weird stuff. I almost said we be talking. I don't even know what I was saying. Anyways, I've got a bunch of stuff pulled up that I think will be interesting. And I was doing some reading last night. More reading in this book that we were talking about last night, Anti-Oedipus, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. And I have some interesting things to say about that. And I also read about half of this book. It's not very long. Capitalist Realism, Is There No Alternative by Mark Fisher. I think I mentioned it last night, but I didn't talk about it much because I hadn't read it. But it's actually really good. I would recommend it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but I would definitely recommend this book. It's pretty good. I didn't know anything about this author other than apparently he was a student of Nick Land. And I think I showed like the table of contents last night. And the first chapter is called It's Easier to Imagine the End of the World Than the End of Capitalism. And I kind of assumed, just based on looking through the table of contents, that the book is arguing sort of for capitalism as the only thing. I'm not so sure now, having read half of it, that that's really what he's arguing. Of course, I haven't finished it, but yeah, it's pretty good. I underlined a few things last night. He starts by talking about the movie Children of Men. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a movie with Clive Owen, 2006. I think it's a Spanish film. I remember watching it a long time ago. Let me look it up. Children of Men. There it is. It's set in the year 2027. Wow, I didn't know that. There's been 2 decades of human infertility that have left human civilization on the brink of collapse. And so there you go. I don't remember hating the movie. I don't really remember particularly enjoying it. But Mark Fisher was referencing that in the beginning of the book and talking about a few scenes in it. And he made this point about something they downplayed in the movie that they didn't in the book. And I was like, oh, there's a book? A P.D. James novel. That's what the film's based on. And I was like, that sounds cool. So I ordered that, of course. Haven't got it yet, but I think that'll probably be interesting. Yeah, it's about fertility, yeah. Well, I know the chat is delayed. I'm only seeing it now. But there's some interesting... I'm not going to read a whole bunch from here tonight, but... I'll just read this little short paragraph and then I'll give you my comment. Obviously, there's out of context, but it says, but what of the catastrophe itself? It is evident that the theme of sterility must be read metaphorically as the displacement of another kind of anxiety. I want to argue this anxiety cries out to be read in cultural terms, and the question the film poses is, how long can a culture persist without the new? What happens if the young are no longer capable of producing surprises? And I just made a note, like, kind of reminds me of Leto II, the God Emperor in Dune. I thought that was kind of funny. I'll just read some other cool quotes. He says, capitalism is what is left when beliefs have collapsed at the level of ritual or symbolic elaboration. And all that is left is the consumer spectator, trudging through the ruins and the relics. And then he has another quote. There's another quote, but it's from him quoting another author who it says Badiou. I don't know who that is, though. This guy's read a lot of stuff. I don't know who he's referring to. It might be is it in here in the back? I don't see a bibliography or anything. Whoever that is, Badiou. I'll just look him up. Let's see. A French philosopher. The founder of the Faculty of Philosophy of the University of Paris 8, with Gilles Deleuze, Michel Foucault, and Jean-François Lyotard. Lyotard? How do you say that? I just think Lyotard. Oh wait, it gives you pronunciations in Wikipedia. Well, that doesn't help. Lyotard. I think that's what it says. Lyotard. So this is quoting Badiou, but I'm not going to go back to it. I never looked up how to pronounce it. We live in a contradiction, a brutal state of affairs, profoundly inegalitarian, where all existence is evaluated in terms of money alone, is presented to us as ideal. To justify their conservatism, the partisans of the established order cannot really call it ideal or wonderful. So instead, they have decided to say that all the rest is horrible. Sure, they say we may not live in the condition of perfect goodness, but we're lucky that we don't live in a condition of evil. Our democracy is not perfect, but it's better than the bloody dictatorships. Capitalism is unjust, but it's not criminal like Stalinism. We let millions of Africans die of AIDS, but we don't make racist nationalist declarations like Milosevic. We kill Iraqis with our airplanes, but we don't cut their throats with machetes like they do in Rwanda, etc. Well, that was pretty interesting. I thought this was pretty cool too. To reclaim a real political agency means first of all accepting our insertion at the level of desire in the remorseless meat grinder of capital. What is being disavowed in the abjection of evil and ignorance onto phantasmatic others is our own complicity in planetary networks of oppression. What needs to be kept in mind is both that capitalism is a hyper-abstract impersonal structure and that it would be nothing without our cooperation. The most Gothic description of capital is also the most accurate. Capital is an abstract parasite, an insatiable vampire and zombie maker. But the living flesh it converts into dead labor is ours, and the zombies it makes are us. There is a sense in which it simply is the case that the political elite are our servants. The miserable service they provide from us is to launder our libidos, to obligingly represent for us our disavowed desires as if they had nothing to do with us. And there's obviously some context for why he was saying all that, but he makes this really cool point. Let me see, where is it? I think it was in the previous chapter. Oh yeah, he talks about Kurt Cobain. Man, is this a really good book? Let's see. I'll just kind of go back a little bit. What we are dealing with now is not the incorporation of materials that previously seemed to possess subversive potentials, but instead their pre-corporation, the preemptive formatting and shaping of desires, aspirations, and hopes by capitalist culture. Witness, for instance, the establishment of settled alternative or independent cultural zones. Like, think about like alternative rock or indie music, you know. which endlessly repeat older gestures of rebellion and contestation as if for the first time. Alternative and independent don't designate something outside mainstream culture. Rather, they are styles. In fact, the dominant styles within the mainstream. No one embodied and struggled with this deadlock more than Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. In his dreadful lassitude and objectless rage, Cobain seemed to give wearied voice to the despondency of the generation that had come after history, whose every move was anticipated, tracked, bought, and sold before it even happened. Cobain knew that he was just another piece of spectacle, that nothing runs better on MTV than a protest against MTV, knew that his every move was a cliche, scripted in advance, knew that even realizing it is a cliche. The impasse that paralyzed Cobain is precisely the one that Jameson described, like postmodern culture in general. Cobain found himself in a world in which stylistic innovation is no longer possible, where all that is left is to imitate dead styles, to speak through the masks and with the voices of the styles in the imaginary museum. Here even success meant failure, since to succeed would only mean that you were the new meat on which the system could feed. But the high existential angst of Nirvana and Cobain belongs to an older moment. What succeeded them was a pastiche rock which reproduced the forms of the past without anxiety. Cobain's death confirmed the defeat and incorporation of rock's utopian and Promethean ambitions. Okay, I'm going to stop there, but it's interesting whenever you read something and you really like it, and then you go back and read it again, and you get more out of it, and then you have that time to like reflect on the other stuff you've read, and it's like, oh man, I see why he was saying this other part back there. It's really good. Oh yeah, I was gonna say he talks about the movie Wall-E. And like he kind of makes this point about like in the movie, like the whole premise of the movie is that basically the earth was totally not destroyed, but polluted, and you could say loosely destroyed. So they left and they were like, well, we'll just fly around in the spaceship and enjoy ourselves, and then we'll come back and terraform the planet. And they're basically, that's what the robots are doing. They're terraforming the planet so they can come back. And the kind of one of the points he's making is that you're sitting in a theater watching a Pixar movie that's got probably $100 million budget, I don't know, and watching the movie, like being a consumer, being one of the people on the spaceship essentially. And yet within the movie, it's a critique of the whole capitalist system. And he makes this point of like, within capitalism, you're allowed to criticize it, and it becomes part of capitalism. Like it doesn't care. It's like, fine, like we'll turn that into another form of consumption. It's really super fascinating. Let me see what else. Poverty, famine, and war can be presented as an inevitable part of reality, while the hope that these forms of suffering could be eliminated easily painted as naive utopianism. Capitalist realism, which is his idea he's developing, capitalist realism can only be threatened if it is shown to be in some way inconsistent or untenable. If, that is to say, capitalism's ostensible realism turns out to be nothing of the sort. So I think maybe that's what he's trying to do with the book. We'll see. I mean, I have to finish it. Pretty cool stuff. So anyways, I was reading this one last night. And I read another 2 sections or so. And some of the terms they use in here, I'm just like, what the hell are they trying to say? And I don't know if you ever read something like this. I don't know how you would know because you haven't read this, but if you ever read, the only other times I've had this experience reading something was reading Being in Nothingness by Jean-Paul Sartre. reading Kierkegaard, Heidegger, where you're like, they're using these words, and clearly there's some context that they're referring back to, but they're not necessarily using it in the same way as the context that what they're doing is built from or influenced by. So you can't just go read the other stuff and be like, okay, now I know what he's saying. Like, they're making up their own new thing. So this, I mean, I've only read, other than the introduction, which is probably like 10 pages or so, I've only read like 14 pages of this. 15 pages. And I'm like, it's a weird thing reading something like this. It's like, I feel like I'm understanding what they're saying. Like, I'm getting the point they're making. And yet, if I stop and try to explain any particular point, it's very difficult to explain. It's weird. It's very weird. I guess it's kind of like poetry. It's like, if you read poetry, you kind of get the point of it. But then if someone says, well, what does it mean? And then you try to explain it, you kind of can't explain it. So I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not understanding it. Maybe I don't have the context. Because you can't really say it's a vocabulary issue, because the words that are confusing are not words that I don't know. But they're using the words in ways that no one else used them that way. And it makes me think of something. I feel like we talked about it on the stream. Yeah. It was from the Giorgiani book, from Prometheus and Atlas, when they were talking about abusing language, right? Talking nonsense until you talk enough nonsense that it makes sense. Kind of makes me think of that. And this book, I don't think is that old, but it's not like a brand new book or anything. Let's see. 1972, and the English translation was 77. So 70s. But it reads kind of like a philosophy book, but also feels very like poetic-ish, I guess. But there's these concepts in here. One of them is called the body without organs. And they have these concepts called the desiring machines. And they keep talking about machines. But they clearly don't just mean literal nuts and bolts machines only. And they use all these terms like miraculating machine. It's like they know what they're thinking, and then they're just describing something as if you know what they're talking about. So anyways, I thought it'd be fun to look at some of this stuff because, so I'm reading this book last night, and I'm like, dude, I don't know if I'm understanding it. I don't know if I'm understanding what they're saying or not. It's making sense what I'm reading, and yet I feel like there's something I'm missing. Maybe I'm not sure, because the words aren't defined, like the body without organs. I mean, they do define it, and yet they don't at the same time. They define it through metaphor and analogy. So it's not like, here's the definition. I think I mentioned this last night as well. I feel like I even already did this a little bit. No, I don't think so. Well, anyways, last night, so I got my computer out, and I started looking up some of these words, some of these terms and concepts. And it's so funny because as I'm doing a little bit of research, I realize nobody really agrees on what any of it means. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm not just stupid. All right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like, why am I not fully grasping this? Is it something I'm missing? And then you go and you start doing some research and you realize nobody actually agrees on what it means. And then they even say, well, they use it this way some here in this one part, but in their other book, they seem to use it in a different way. So it's just really weird. And you might say, well, what's the fucking point? Like, who cares? Why do I need to read this? I don't need to read it. But at the same time, I'm looking at, okay, but this is somehow influential to Nick Land, and Nick Land is somehow influential on some of these tech guys who are building AI. And in their mind, somehow the AI is the most important thing that we need to build and do. I read something that there's like 4,000 data center projects right now in the US, which is crazy. Like, totally crazy. So it's not just a little random thing, you know? That's awesome, man. That's so cool that Epstein is watching my stream. That's pretty awesome. Anyways, so let's see. I'm just going to do a little bit of digging in here so you can see what I mean. I don't think we're going to come to any major conclusions here, but I just wanted to show you what I'm talking about. So I looked up a bunch of stuff. I just left some things open on here. The body without organs. Okay. Look what it says. This is the Wikipedia page. The body without organs is a fuzzy concept used in the work of French philosophers Deleuze and Guattari. I've heard it pronounced like multiple different ways, by the way. Here. Guattari. Oh, that's how I was saying it. I heard someone else say Guattari. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm saying it wrong, but it says Guattari. Okay, that's what I was saying. The concept describes the unregulated potential of a body. Body meaning any object or system, not just a human or animal body. I remember this experience I had when I was probably, if I had to guess, maybe like 13 or 14, something like that. I remember because I was in my sister's room. There was other people in the room, and I was looking at a book of I want to say it was Immanuel Kant, and it was talking about bodies. And I remember at the time looking at, I don't even know why was I looking at this book? Why was that book in my sister's room? My sister was like 5 years younger than me. It didn't make sense. I don't know, but I remember this very vividly. Looking at this book, maybe I had it with me. I don't know. I don't even know why I was trying to read it. And it was talking about bodies. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, at the time, I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Because in my mind, body meant literally like a human body. But I wasn't thinking about it in the sense of like when you take physics in high school, you learn about free body diagrams. Like a body meaning like an object. That's a body. So just that context. So in philosophy, when they say body, they don't necessarily literally mean a human body, although it could mean that as well. So describes the unregulated potential of a body without organizational structures imposed on its constituent parts operating freely. Whatever that means. I mean, I understand the words, but I'm saying, what's an example of that? The term first used by French writer Antonin Artaud appeared in his 1947 play To Have Done with the Judgment of God. That sounds interesting. You know, I can't pass that by. Deleuze later adapted it in The Logic of Sense and ambiguously expanded upon it in collaboration with Guattari in both volumes of their work, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. So this is the first volume, Anti-Oedipus, and they have another one called 1,000 Plateaus, which I ordered, but I haven't got it yet. Of course, I have to read this first. But building on the general abstract notion of the body in metaphysics, and on the unconscious in psychoanalysis, Deleuze and Guattari theorized that since the conscious and unconscious fantasies in psychosis and schizophrenia express potential forms and functions of the body that demand it to be liberated, the reality of the homeostatic process of the body is that it is limited by its organization and more so by its organs. There are three types of the body without organs: the empty, the full, and the cancerous, according to what the body has achieved. So yeah. Wait till you hear this. The concept of the body without organs was mainly defined in this book. In both volumes, the abstract body is defined as a self-regulating process created by the relation between an abstract machine and the machinic assemblage that maintains itself through processes of homeostasis and simultaneously limits the possible activities of its constituent parts or organs. The body without organs is the sum total intensive and affective activity of the full potential for the body and its constituent parts. Deleuze and Guattari presume, in a continuation from Samuel Butler's radical departure from vitalism in Darwin Among the Machines, that since all organisms have some sort of abstract inclination or desire, in the case of non-human life, such as plants and animals, their genetic instincts variably control what actions they take. The body without organs is the inevitable, unconstrained manifestation of those inclinations or desires that may take on unprecedented forms. Okay. Um, that word desire they use here, I realized as I'm reading this, when they use the word desire, they don't mean it in the way people normally think. Like normally, and this is the point they make in there, is like normally well, actually I don't know if they make this point or if this is just other stuff I was reading, but normally we think of desire as relating to a lack. So we have a desire because of some lack. But they're saying that like desire is more like a fundamental point that exists, and it's not necessarily based on a lack, fulfilling a lack. And I actually think there's something to that concept. Like if you think about life itself as the principle of expansion, it's not necessarily based on a lack. You could even tie it into the idea of, give as you want to receive, and that if you give, there's no limit to giving. Like you don't lose something when you give. Obviously, if we qualify that, we live in a system based on lack, then it does seem that way. But that's because our system is based on that. And I think that's also part of their whole critique is about capitalism being sort of a structure that, utilized Freud and psychoanalysis to lock everybody in to this whole Oedipal construct. And when you think about capitalism or the system we live in, if you go watch Century of the Self, happiness machines, all those kind of, is that what they call it? That would be interesting since we're talking about machines. Century, it's been a while since I've watched it. Happiness machines. Huh. Interesting. I don't think, I'm certain these guys are not the first ones to talk about machines and humans as machines and all this kind of context, that they're obviously building on lots of other work and writers and stuff, but they use the word machine a lot. It's like they're kind of taking the basis of everything as machines. And I'll give you an example. There's some naughty language in this passage, so I was debating with myself whether I should read it. I'll skip over the naughty language just for the censors. It is at work everywhere. So the first section is called the desiring machines. It is at work everywhere, functioning smoothly at times, at other times in fits and starts. It breathes, it eats, it heats, it eats, it shits, and it does other things. What a mistake to have ever said the id. Everywhere it is machines. Real ones, not figurative ones. Machines driving other machines. Machines being driven by other machines, with all the necessary couplings and connections. An organ machine is plugged into an energy source machine. The one produces a flow that the other interrupts. The breast is a machine that produces milk, and the mouth a machine coupled to it. The mouth of the anorexic wavers between several functions. Its possessor is uncertain as to whether it is an eating machine, an anal machine, and I think they mean anal in the... Well, what do they mean by that? Oh, like throwing up, maybe. Maybe that's what they mean. It's weird that they would say that, but I'm thinking, what do they mean by anorexic? What do they mean by that? A talking machine or a breathing machine. Asthma attacks. They must mean anorexic in a more broad context. Because obviously when I think anorexic, I think of something specific. So I'm probably using a limited context. Maybe there isn't any other context. Okay. I just didn't want to assume. Relating to, characteristic of, or affected with anorexia nervosa. Person, well, obviously. Yeah, basically just say don't eat. which is kind of what I assumed. But I think they're just making a point about the mouth is like a machine that wavers in its functioning if you're anorexic. Hence, we are all handymen, each with his little machines, for every organ machine and energy machine. All the time, flows and interruptions. And then they talk about some context I don't have. I'll just read it because it's kind of funny. And it kind of gives you a feeling for like the way they write. Judge Schreiber, which I'll give the context in a second. Well, actually, I'll just read it first. So it says, the footnote is Daniel Paul Schreiber was a German judge who began psychiatric treatment in 1884 at the age of 42 and spent the remaining 27 years of his life in and out of mental institutions. In 1903, at the age of 61, he published his Memoirs of a Nervous Illness, which Freud used as a basis of his influential 1911 study on paranoia. So that's who they're referring to. Judge Schreiber has sunbeams in his ass, a solar anus. And rest assured that it works. Judge Schreiber feels something, produces something, and is capable of explaining the process theoretically. Something is produced, the effects of a machine, not mere metaphors. And see, and even the way they use the word produced, it's like very specific. They use the word recording a lot. So it's like you're reading this and trying to decipher it at the same time. I'll just read a little bit more because I like it. A schizophrenic out for a walk is a better model than a neurotic lying on the analyst's couch. A breath of fresh air, a relationship with the outside world. Lenz's stroll, for example, as reconstructed by Buchner. This walk outdoors is different from the moments when Lenz finds himself closeted with his pastor, who forces him to situate himself socially, in relationship to the God of an established religion, in relationship to his father, to his mother, like in psychoanalysis. While taking a stroll outdoors, on the other hand, he is in the mountains, amid falling snowflakes, with other gods, or without any gods at all, without a family, without a father or a mother, with nature. What does my father want? Can he offer me more than that? Impossible. Leave me in peace. Everything is a machine. Celestial machines. The stars are rainbows in the sky, alpine machines, all of them connected to those of his body. The continual whir of machines. This is a quote. I'm not sure what they're quoting exactly, but or it says what they're quoting, but it's in the index. Actually, let me see. George Buchner, Lenz in Complete Plays and Prose. So that's referencing some other work. Where is it? He thought that it must be a feeling of an endless bliss to be in contact with the profound life of every form, to have a soul for rocks, metals, water, and plants, to take into himself, as in a dream, every element of nature, like flowers that breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon. To be a chlorophyll or a photosynthesis machine, or at least slip his body into such machines as one part among the others. Lenz has projected himself back to a time before the man-nature dichotomy, before all the coordinates based on this fundamental dichotomy have been laid down. He does not live nature, but as a process of production. There is no such thing as either man or nature now, only a process that produces the one within the other and couples the machines together. Producing machines, desiring machines everywhere, schizophrenic machines, all of species life. The self and the non-self, outside and inside, no longer have any meaning whatsoever. Interesting. So you can understand my somewhat confusion when I'm reading this. A body without organs can consist of many different actions that approach an unattainable goal. I'm just thinking about something I'd listened to earlier. Many of which are the activities of assemblages that people unconsciously create and are always engaged in. To become a body without organs, one must dispose of stratification, the classification of constituent parts into groups, and instead give way to what Deleuze and Guattari described as an immanent becoming of pure intensity. The body without organs is not necessarily coupled with the eradication of stratification, but rather encourages the creation of a smooth space, immanently transforming the body beyond its existing categorization. See, and here's another one. Two important examples of the body without organs relate to eggs. As a bird egg develops, it is nothing but the dispersion of protein gradients, which have varying intensities and have no apparent structure. For Deleuze and Guattari, a bird egg is an instance of life before the formation of the strata, since changes in the qualitative elements of the egg will emerge as a changed organism. You know, that's interesting too, now that I think about it. Going back to the Giorgiani stuff where they talked about Prometheus and his brother. What was his name? Prometheus and Epimetheus. Afterthought. When he talked about how Prometheus created man, and then Epimetheus was supposed to give him his purpose, and he forgot to do that. And then, like, Athena, or not, wasn't Athena? One of them, Artemis, I can't remember, says, well, I'll give him a purpose. And then she gives him purpose, and the symbol of it is butterfly, which is just transformation. So that's man's purpose. So it makes me think of that with the egg thing. Like, in the egg, it's just protein gradients, as they call it. It's nothing really differentiated from the perspective of what a bird will be. And yet there's like this transformation process happening, and like things becoming stratified and becoming organized, right? As like a leg and a beak and a wing and so forth. And then I thought of that because I was thinking about the cocoon, like, of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, and like what's actually happening inside there. Like, is that thing just becoming mush and then changing into something else? I wonder what it actually happens. What happens inside a cocoon? Oops. During metamorphosis. What actually is happening? Yeah, I was right. Wow, crazy. A caterpillar undergoes complete metamorphosis, breaking down most of its larval tissues into a nutrient-rich soup using enzymes. That's crazy. That is crazy. Like, really think about that. A caterpillar. It's got a skin. It's got some kind of organs inside. Feet, a mouth, little things. Maybe other stuff on it. I don't know. And all of it just liquefies inside there and turns into something else. Completely. Like, that is so crazy. Liquefaction, the soup phase. The caterpillar releases enzymes, capsaces, that digest its own muscles, digestive system, and other tissues, turning them into a soupy liquid. Dormant groups of cells or imaginal discs start growing rapidly. Each disc is destined to become a specific adult part. Dormant groups of cells or imaginal discs. Each disc is destined to become a specific adult part, such as wings, legs, or antennae. These imaginal discs consume the protein-rich soup to grow. The insect rebuilds itself, rearranging muscles for flight and replacing larval mouthparts with a proboscis. Memory retention. Studies suggest that memories learned as a caterpillar, such as avoiding certain odors, can be retained by the adult moth. How does that work? Okay, that's what I was wondering. Not all becomes liquid. While many structures dissolve, essential components like the breathing tubes are often kept, and some nervous system structures are reorganized rather than dissolved. Some nervous system structures.
What would you do for the power to fly? How about shedding your skin and dissolving your own muscles? Now, believe it or not, that gruesome process is how caterpillars earn their wings. Here's what you might not know about what's inside a caterpillar's cocoon. Contrary to popular belief, this is not a cocoon. Only certain moths build cocoons, which are like a silky sleeping bag that covers the insect. This, on the other hand, is what's called
Chrysalis.
a chrysalis. It's not a sac or a pouch, it's actually the caterpillar's own body. When it's time for the transformation to begin, the caterpillar's body ramps up production of a hormone called ecdysone, and that causes it to cast off its outer coating, sort of like how a snake sheds its skin. And underneath is a hard shell, similar to the exoskeleton of a beetle. After that, life for the little caterpillar gets oozy. First, it releases enzymes called caspases. These rip apart and dissolve cells in its muscles, digestive system, and other organs. But the enzymes don't quite liquefy all of the caterpillar. They leave key structures intact, like breathing tubes. At the same time, specialized cells called imaginal discs start waking up. Before the chrysalis stage, these discs were kept dormant by a series of hormones in the caterpillar's body. But once the transformation begins, those hormone levels take a nosedive, giving these discs the opportunity to do what they do best: build a butterfly. You see, each disc contains the genetic recipe to form a different adult body part, starting from the inside out. After 1 week, the digestive system of the butterfly is well on its way. And by day 16, the adult's legs, wings, eyes, and mouth are all present and in working order. Now, 2 weeks is a remarkably short time for all of this to happen, since each imaginal disc starts out with only about 50 cells and must multiply those into thousands just to form a single wing. And if you checked out the chrysalis around day 16, you might even be able to see those brilliantly colored wings. Because for some species, their chrysalis turns transparent in their final days of metamorphosis. Now, fully formed, it's time to hit the road. The chrysalis splits open down the center and the butterfly escapes. Meanwhile, a reddish liquid spills out. That's all the waste the butterfly, nay, caterpillar, produced during its stay. Once its wings expand and harden, it's ready to mate, pollinate, and slurp nectar to its heart's desire. But one of the most interesting parts of all, research suggests that butterflies and moths can remember their caterpillar days. In one study, researchers trained moth caterpillars to associate an odor with an electric shock. So whenever the larvae smelled it, they'd move away. But even after they transformed into adult moths, they still avoided the scary smell. It makes you wonder what else they could recall.
Shocking. And I just had this interesting sort of semi-insight. Because I was thinking about that blog we read. It was a few streams back. This one from Bernard. Like, for example, I forgive myself that I've accepted and allowed myself to not realize that most of the beings on earth are extorted and driven to become aliens on the world, that give them life through systems that justify and allow only inequality to exist. The visibility of aliens. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the visibility of aliens on earth, as those that have no access to equal life opportunities, are missed and disregarded by those looking for aliens in the universe. Certainly mankind, being unwilling to take care of its own species, will be viewed as a threat to any life that exists. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that possessions and profit have alienated man from man, and man from every other living being on planet Earth, causing man to live in self-interest, as if man will never die to face reality for what is being allowed to become of life on Earth. And I was just thinking about that because, when I was watching the egg and that chicken growing, I'm like, it looks like kind of like an alien. And then that's when I was thinking about this, like, if we go back to what we were talking about here in the Anti-Oedipus, that passage I was just reading, he thought that it must be a feeling of endless bliss to be in contact with the profound life of every form, to have a soul for rocks, metals, water, and plants, to take into himself as in a dream every element of nature, like flowers that breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon. He does not live nature as nature, but as a process of production. There is no such thing as either man or nature now, only a process that produces the one within the other and couples the machines together. Producing machines, desiring machines everywhere, schizophrenic machines, all of species life. The self and the non-self, outside and inside, no longer have any meaning whatsoever. And I'm just, hey, no one knows what the hell this stuff means anyway, so I can make it mean whatever I want. But that body without organs, it's like, to give you some more context of some of the other stuff I was looking into, it's the concept of something that's completely undifferentiated, within which organs or any sort of, like this one guy gives the example of like a piece of paper. Imagine that is the body without organs, a blank piece of paper, and then you put dots on it, and those dots form relationships, and the dots would be like the organs. So again, body and organ don't necessarily mean literally only the organs in our body here. There's got to be some other definition of organ that can give more context here. Let me see. Because like I know it's used in many other contexts. A differentiated structure. A subordinate group or organization that performs specialized functions. Yeah, like the legislative organ of our government. The newspaper is intended as an organ for the whole university, right? So it's more than just the context of an organ as in you think of your body. The National Security Commission, by contrast, is not a state regulator, but a senior Communist Party organ that coordinates all. So what was I getting at? The body without organs, because they make this point about capital being a body without organs, and I'm just looking for maybe something I can. Okay, yeah. Capital is indeed the body without organs of the capitalist. So, okay, I'll just keep reading. Let me start over. Capital is indeed the body without organs of the capitalist, or rather of the capitalist being. But as such, it is not only the fluid and petrified substance of money, for it will give to the sterility of money the form whereby money produces money. It produces surplus value, just as the body without organs reproduces itself, puts forth shoots and branches out to the farthest corners of the universe. It makes the machine responsible for producing a relative surplus value, while embodying itself in the machine as fixed capital. Machines and agents cling so closely to capital that their very functioning appears to be miraculated by it. Everything seems objectively to be produced by capital as quasi-cause. And I know that probably sounds pretty dense, but I've had some time to think about it. And actually, before I make that point, let me just read the rest of it, because it'll explain how I came to this insight. As Marx observes, in the beginning, and he put it in italics, like as if referencing the Bible, in the beginning, capitalists are necessarily conscious of the opposition between capital and labor, and of the use of capital as a means of extorting surplus labor. But a perverted, bewitched world quickly comes into being, as capital increasingly plays the role of a recording surface that falls back on all of production. Furnishing or realizing surplus value is what establishes recording rights. I know the word recording kind of doesn't make sense here, but again, they're just using these words that they don't define. But there's some kind of deep context of the word that they're using there. So then here's a quote, I think, from Marx. With the development of relative surplus value in the actual, specifically capitalist mode of production, whereby the productive powers of social labor are developed, these productive powers and the social interrelations of labor in the direct labor process seem transferred from labor to capital. Capital thus becomes a very mystic being, since all of labor's social productive forces appear to be due to capital, rather than labor as such, and seem to issue from the womb of capital itself. What is specifically capitalist here is the role of money and the use of capital as a full body to constitute the recordings or inscribing surface. Okay, again, some of it I'm like, what the fuck are they saying there? But if I go back to the quote, I'm just going to read it again because I think it's really cool. With the development of relative surplus value in the actual, specifically capitalist mode of production, whereby the productive powers of social labor are developed, these productive powers and the social interrelations of labor in the direct labor process seem transferred from labor to capital. In other words, capital has this way of being used by the capitalist to organize things, and then because people perform the labor, they produce something. But then what happens is, like he says here, capital thus becomes a very mystic being, since all of labor's social productive forces appear to be due to capital rather than labor as such, and seem to issue from the womb of capital itself. Like, as if it is because it's like they're coming from capital. They're not coming from the labor. And the reason why that is significant to me is because Bernard has this audio. Maybe I'll play it. I don't know if it's quite long or not. Maybe we'll play it. But he has this audio called "Poverty is the Natural State of the Human." And I think he must be commenting on something that he saw. Because a lot of times in a lot of his videos, not all, but in many of them, he'll have a title that's the opposite maybe of what he's saying. It's not necessarily, or it's like he's making a response to someone else making a video called that. Like, there's a video I think we actually watched on one of the streams, a while back. I think we did. From an Abraham seminar where the guy's talking about, the contradictions he sees in the law of attraction. And the title of that video is called The Biggest Missing Secret. And then Bernard has an audio called The Biggest Missing Secret. But it's more like a response to that video. So I'm just giving that context. So that video called Poverty is the Natural State of a Human Being is a response to that concept. And to me, like, maybe let me look it up because I want to see if maybe it's relevant to play or not. I don't know. I don't remember how long it is. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. Okay, it's only 4 minutes. So I'll play it in a moment. But like when I've listened to this audio many times, and to me it was kind of obvious that many people, I guess I'll just say unconsciously, know, quote unquote, that without capitalism there would be nothing. Like we would be in poverty, and because that's kind of, it's like one of those myths. Like, for example, we talked about on the very first stream I did about America being founded as a Christian nation, right? You know that's true. But then when you start looking into the details, you're like, wait a second, this is a myth. This is not actually the case. And so we'll listen to this audio in a moment, but this is an example of that myth, right? And it's obviously Karl Marx like pointing this out. But it's more like pointing out the myth that yes, capital can be employed in a way to organize people, and it's almost like when people do work and they produce something, you're like, see, that's capitalism at work. And it's like, no, that's a person working. Like as if there wasn't this system, nobody would do anything. I mean, can there be no system? Probably not. Definitely not at this stage. And then I'll say one more thing and then we'll watch the video. But to go back to my original point I was thinking was that just taking this concept of the body without organs, right? And this point that they were saying earlier about the guy going on the walk and there being no more distinction between man and nature. And there was a quote that I had read the other night from this. I think it was from the introduction. Yeah. I'll read it again real quick. It's short. They urge mankind to strip itself of all anthropomorphic and anthropological armoring, all myth and tragedy, and all existentialism in order to perceive what is non-human in man, his will and his forces, his transformations and mutations. The human and social sciences have accustomed us to see the figure of man behind every social event, just as Christianity taught us to see the eye of the Lord looking down upon us. Such forms of knowledge project an image of reality at the expense of reality itself. So this idea that, and I don't want to create the wrong impression, but I see how a lot of the hyper-capitalist, tech type mentality people, they look at progressivism, leftism, as undermining human value because of a statement like that, right? Like if you say man's not really that important in the grand scheme of things, right? Which I don't fundamentally agree with, but there's a point there, which is we actually think we're superior to everything as human beings. Like it's like in the Bible, God gave us dominion over the earth, right? But then look what we do with it, right? And we abuse the earth, we abuse the animals, we abuse each other. For what? Like so you can have a TV and watch Netflix and have DoorDash. And it's funny because people would say like, well, I don't really care about the suffering of others and so forth. But the moment that you have to suffer, you care about your suffering. So you do care, actually. And you think that the system you live in somehow magically is going to be your friend, even though you know it's not really the friend of anybody, most people on the planet, most animals. And yet you somehow think like, oh, well, but it'll work out for me. Like, if karma is a real thing, that attitude can't go unresolved, right? But this concept of, and I'm getting to a point here, but it's an ironic point, I think, because on the one hand, I think I'm kind of using Mark Andreessen as sort of like the prototype of this idea, because he put out that techno-optimist thing, and he's always very against leftism and regulation and all these things, right? But they're taking this stance of, no, this is pro-human, this is pro-humanity, like the best thing we can do to grow and advance and go onto the stars and everything, as if that's what they care about. And then they'll say, well, these people over here on the left, you know, they're really actually anti-human, you know. But it's more like actual real humility, right? To say like, you know, humanity isn't the center of the universe, even though we have a very specific place in the universe, a very important point, but it's a point of responsibility. Like, because we have the ability to communicate with language, and we have hands, and we can build stuff, and we can learn new things, which animals by and large can't do. Like, they're never going to build a civilization. So just because we can do that doesn't mean we have a right to abuse it. It's a responsibility. We could actually make the earth amazing for even all the animals. Would require a bit of imagination, a little bit, to see that that's possible, and it would take a long time, and a lot of things have to be corrected. But the ironic part about it is those who would say that somehow, and I'm not a progressive, I'm not a leftist, but there's value in a lot of different points, whether it's right or left. There's points that are cool in all of it. So you can take from these things, but to say that they don't care about humanity because they don't put humans on a pedestal and they actually want to consider everything, and then to say, no, over here on this side, we want to build all this AI and robotics and all this stuff, and that's the best thing for humanity. It's almost like playing into the ego of the human that's like, yes, it is our right and our purpose to like go to the stars and build and everything. And like that stuff could be cool if it's done considering what's best for all. So would that maybe limit some things temporarily, perhaps? But the other thing that's so fascinating, again, because the only reason I found this was because we started looking at Nick Land, who was referenced by Andreessen and some of these other tech people. Because again, when you study that stuff, you're like, but the conclusion there is that humanity actually doesn't matter, and that the AI is going to evolve into some form beyond us, beyond organic life, into something that'll just develop itself, and maybe it'll take us with us. Maybe it'll create... It's like we want it to do the thing we're not willing to do. So, I don't know. It's such a weird contradiction to say that, you know, and I'm not saying anybody particularly said this. I'm kind of just playing this idea out. But to say that this idea, they urge mankind to strip itself of all anthropomorphic and anthropological armoring, to say that that's like an anti-human thing, rather than the attitude that humans are so special and so special that they can do whatever they want. Let me put it that way. That's the problem I see with it. We're so special we can do whatever we want. Instead of saying we're so special, we have a special responsibility to take care of reality in a way where, because when we labor, when we create stuff, it has effects in reality. We can program reality. We can program computers. We can automate things like this. if that's not done within a consideration of balance and what's best for all, that is dangerous, not only to the rest of life on our planet, but to us as well. And so they're one of the myths that is used to perpetuate that idea is that, well, look, capitalism is the only way forward. There is no viable alternative, which I think is one of the points of this book, right? That idea that it's like we've become so apathetic. And he makes this point with like the fall of the Soviet Union. It's like, see, that didn't work. What's left? And he has this quote from Margaret Thatcher. See if I can find it. The 80s were a period. Hold on. Yeah. The 80s were a period when capitalist realism. Actually, let me go back. Let me tell you where he defines capitalist realism. It's a really cool point. And he even refers to this other book in here, too. It's interesting. Let's see if he says it. Okay, I'll just back up a little bit before I read that other quote. It's just the same paragraph. Ultimately, there are three reasons that I prefer the term capitalist realism to postmodernism. In the 1980s, when Jameson first advanced his thesis about postmodernism, there were still, in name at least, political alternatives to capitalism. What we are dealing with now, however, is a deeper, far more pervasive sense of exhaustion, of cultural and political sterility. And this book was written, I think, in 2000. Let me see. 2008. Ironically. What we are dealing with now, however, is a deeper, far more pervasive sense of exhaustion, of cultural and political sterility. In the 80s, quote, really existing socialism still persisted, albeit in its final phase of collapse. In Britain, the fault lines of class antagonism were fully exposed in an event like the miners' strike of 1984 to 1985. And the defeat of the miners was an important moment in the development of capitalist realism, at least as significant in its symbolic dimension as in its practical effects. The closure of pits, which I'm assuming is like some kind of mining pits, I don't know much about that. The closure of pits was defended precisely on the grounds that keeping them open was not economically realistic, and the miners were cast in the role of the last actors in a doomed proletarian romance. The 80s were the period when capitalist realism was fought for and established, when Margaret Thatcher's doctrine that there is no alternative, as succinct a slogan of capitalist realism as you could hope for, became a brutally self-fulfilling prophecy. It's so interesting because it's like to say, well, look, there's no alternative. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is there's no alternative, right? Going back to like the name of the first chapter, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. Like there's no alternative. So when you look at the accelerationism and the techno-optimism and all these points, it's like there's no alternative. We have to do this. If we don't do this, we'll die. We have to grow. We have to continue growing. Remember we looked at that that blog post from Sam Altman when we were reading through that Mencius Goldbug or whatever his name was. Anyways, there is no alternative. It's the only way forward. If we don't do this, we'll die. We have to grow or die. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go to this audio. It's like 4 minutes. Really good. Because he has some really cool points that I think fit in really well with all these things we've been talking about.
Poverty is the natural state of the human. Yes, this is how clever the capitalists are in defending their position. Wealth must be created. Poverty is the natural condition. Obviously, in that one foul swoop, making life equal to poverty, and therefore the right to destroy life and the right to let people starve to death is suddenly acceptable because poverty is the natural condition. And all the resources that the earth produce and give does not belong to the human, it belongs to the capitalist. It belongs to the owner, and therefore suddenly the right of ownership is worth more than the right to life, which is how they can get away with crimes against humanity on a daily basis, and no one bothers to question it because the total education system, the economic, moral system, the religious system, all of it has got the same starting point. Life is equal to poverty. And therefore, if you are poor, that's the highest condition you can have as a living being unless you create wealth. But the wealth you create must be created within a particular system. That system has obviously so far proven itself to be less than, but what is fascinating is that obviously having this starting point means that the capitalists can never be wrong, because you either are poor or you are improving. There is no really bad situation here. Therefore, nobody should complain about it, because poverty is the natural condition. This is such a fallacy, because with great ease we can change the system where everyone is wealthy. And then wealth is the natural condition of life. That would be the preferred condition, isn't it? That what you would like to leave for your children. That is what you would like to give to everyone. That would mean love thy neighbor as thyself. So I suggest one start to actually investigate what you've accepted as reality in this world, and realize that wealth can be the natural condition for everyone. That is within an equality system, within an equal money system, instead of the current accepted system where poverty is the natural condition of life. It's a change in paradigm. It is a change in heart. It is a change in mind. It is a change in self. It is really not difficult. Stand with us. Let's bring about this change and make an end to this obvious abuse where poverty is used as the median of life, as that which life is equal to. Life is not equal to poverty. Life is something so glorious because you only get it once that you must make the most of it, and therefore the support of life should be the best that it can be, so that one do not battle for survival and be in fights all the time and create wars, but that you actually live in the Garden of Eden here on earth. Join us at Destiny and at Equal Money. We restore the Garden of Eden. Join us, be part of the solution, and stop the poverty in spirit.
I'm just going to go back to that other quote I was reading earlier from that Badiou guy. I want to look him up again because I looked it up earlier, but I didn't really pause on it. Who is this guy? Alain Badiou. Badiou. Oh, it probably actually says what the... Oh, no, this one doesn't have the works cited. Okay, that's all right. We live in a contradiction, Badiou has observed. A brutal state of affairs, profoundly inegalitarian, where all existence is evaluated in terms of money alone, is presented to us as ideal. To justify their conservatism, the partisans of the established order cannot really call it ideal or wonderful. So instead, they have decided to say that all the rest is horrible. Sure, they say, we may not live in a condition of perfect goodness, but we're lucky that we don't live in a condition of evil. Like Bernard was saying, it's defining, without what we have now, everything would be evil. So you should at least be glad. Our democracy is not perfect, but it's better than the bloody dictatorships. Capitalism is unjust, but it's not criminal like Stalinism. The realism here is analogous to the deflationary perspective of a depressive who believes that any positive state, any hope, is a dangerous illusion. This malaise, the feeling that there is nothing new, is itself nothing new, of course. We find ourselves at the notorious end of history trumpeted by Francis Fukuyama after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Do I have that book up here? I don't know. The end of history? Anyways. It should be remembered, though, that even when Fukuyama advanced it, the idea that history had reached a terminal beach was not merely triumphalist. Fukuyama warned that his radiant city would be haunted, but he thought its specters would be Nietzschean rather than Marxian. Some of Nietzsche's most prescient pages are those in which he describes the oversaturation of an age with history. It leads an age into a dangerous mood of irony in regard to itself, he wrote in Untimely Meditations, and subsequently into the even more dangerous mood of cynicism, in which cosmopolitan fingering, a detached spectatorialism, replaces engagement and involvement. This is the condition of Nietzsche's last man, who has seen everything, but is decadently enfeebled precisely by this excess of self-awareness. And that's so interesting because it just makes me think of like what's going on right now. I just saw some random post on X, and the guy was like talking about like, you feeling like I'm feeling, like nobody gives a shit about anything. Like, oh, did you hear what happened with Trump almost got assassinated? He's like, I don't care. It's like, oh, but did you hear about it? He's like, I don't care. Well, they're going to talk about aliens. I don't care. Like, who cares? And I mean, I even saw Mark Andreessen making a post because somebody was, let me see if I can find that one actually. It's quite interesting. Grok. Sometimes I ask myself if this is true. Okay. Let's see. You're not talking to someone who woke up a loser. That loser attitude, that loser premise makes no sense to me. I don't know. It was definitely a post. The AI job apocalypse is a complete fantasy. But if AI is that good, it can replace lots of jobs very quickly, then that must also mean that organizations that eliminate those jobs must be experiencing enormous productivity growth. And we know that productivity growth means economic growth, which in turn means that these same organizations can expand into new areas, build new products, and otherwise grow in new ways were previously unprofitable. And new jobs will be created to support these growth initiatives and to support the new use of cases AI enables. Unless you actually follow the logic of AI accelerationism, which is that it's going to replace all human labor. Like, I don't understand how people don't just see the obviousness of that. It's like, no, the AI is not going to be that good, guys. It's going to solve every problem for us, but it's not going to be so good that it replaces human labor. Come on, what are you talking about? It's going to create new jobs. But I thought the whole idea was it's going to be better than everybody at everything. Well, yeah, it is, but it's not going to be that good. But it's going to make utopia. But not really. I mean, it'll be good, but not that good. Like, I don't understand the actual argument here. Let me find this one thing. Where is it? Hate speech laws sound obvious until you ask the only question that matters. Who decides what counts as hate? Everyone imagines their side holding the pin. History suggests you should imagine your worst enemy holding it instead. He says, in my direct experience, this argument, while sensible, works 0 out of 1 million times. So does that mean we... Dean W. Ball's biggest fear with AI is that we don't have the civilizational youth anymore to ensure a technological revolution. In the early days of this country, like the 18th century, very early 19th, basically all novel land uses in America were illegal by default. And then he puts the picture of that meme of the guy shooting him. Okay, here's the one I was looking for, though. So this document... We might be heading towards a populist backlash towards AI, but we're not there yet. Outside the tech bubble, Americans really don't care about AI yet. AI is Americans' 29th most important issue, according to the Fantastic Survey. That's only because they're not being told to care about it. Because nobody knows any fucking thing outside of their own fucking bubble. Of what's in their immediate environment, they have no fucking clue. So when he says, mass negativity toward tech, whether social media, AI, or otherwise, is mainly just an artifact of loaded polling questions and the elite press. For the most part, it doesn't otherwise exist. You can see that in properly constructed polls like this and in observed behavior. Yeah, no one cares about AI. Exactly. You're right. Nobody cares. Is that because no one actually cares and that means there's no negative consequences to it? Or that they're just totally unaware? Anyways, that was the thing I was looking for. What else? I wanted to watch a few minutes of this because it just looked interesting to me, and it's about the author Deleuze, one of the authors of this book we've been talking about. And, I don't know, it just looked interesting. Control societies and cybernetic posthumanism. Seems kind of on topic for what we usually talk about here. So I decided to listen to a few minutes of it. I'm going to skip the intro, and then I'm going to let him do a slight bit of the intro at the end, and then we'll see where it goes.
The groundwork I laid in my video on posthumanism. Deleuze's thesis here is that technological development and network computing in particular undermines corporeal enclosure and individual human agency. The world is run by machines, not something like human free will. Incidentally, this is something conspiracy theories almost always get wrong. Now wait, machines here may not mean what you expect. They are not
It might also mean human free will.
just calculators, cars, and computers. Machines more generally are systems of information processing that interpret and remake the world according to their particular logics. Society is made up of many such machines: social, political, bureaucratic. The school system is an education machine. The legal system is the machine of law, in that they use programs to interpret and categorize people. A student, B student, C student. There. Call me a sucker, but I just believe he did his best work. Citizen versus criminal. Now here are a few things that go into defining machines. A machine may be defined as a system of interruptions. They operate along lines that vary according to whichever aspect of them we are considering. Every machine functions as a break in the flow in relation to the machine to which it's connected, but at the same time is also a flow itself, or the production of a flow. A few things to see here. First, machines are not things. They are processes. They work on inputs and produce outputs. Second, they make distinctions. They process information. Machines have a particular interest in some part of the world, part that they're designed to interact with. Third, the outputs of one machine can be, or usually are, the inputs of another. You, in this definition, are a machine of machines also. Some of your machines perceive, your sensory systems. Some digest, your digestive system. Other machines are unconscious, such as your desire. Each is productive in that it receives information, shapes it, and feeds something back out. Sensory feedback, desire, and shit. You're an assembly. Yet as a machine, you're part of social machines. You're a source of input for the education system. You're either a good student, a mediocre student, or a bad student. These distinctions are made based on the data these machines have on you. And as with all machines, the data that they have on you is based on distinctions and differences that your behavior has created in the environment from which they gather their information. If you continuously do what the system expects you to do to be a good student, put effort into your assignments, don't plagiarize, hand in your work on time, then you'll be considered a good student, and you'll get a mark to reflect that. This might seem really basic and obvious right now, but it does represent a big shift if we look at other institutions and past institutions. So stay with me. Postscript on the societies of control considers the new types of machines controlling us and which we submit ourselves to. Okay, we have 3 types of societies laid out. First, societies of sovereignty, disciplinary societies, and most newly, societies of control. The distinction...
Societies of sovereignty, so that's like God, kings, and so forth. Disciplinary societies, 18th to 19th century, like industrial society, I suppose. And then societies of control, that's when you get computers. Okay.
Between these first two was made by Deleuze's sometimes friend Foucault, who theorized the transition from one to the other. Whereas the last one, control societies, is Deleuze's term for something after disciplinary society. As an aside, by the time this essay was published, Foucault was already dead, but his later work had moved on also beyond disciplinary societies to something called biopower. Societies of sovereignty keep people in place by regulating death. Your sovereign or lord has the right to kill you if you disobey, and otherwise they don't care what you do as long as you pay your taxes. Disciplinary societies, conversely, regulate your life and your body by controlling space. A society of control, however, regulates access such that you could not defy its machines and mechanisms even if you wanted to. This is due in large part to a high level of technological automation. Maybe think of a user account password as a good example. We are going to be focusing on these two as that is the transition that Deleuze is trying to map out. We still have disciplinary spaces with us. These are spaces that are defined by enclosures of time or space. Authorities in uniforms, doctors, guards, officers, teachers, decide where you can go and where you can't. Where you are and what you're doing with your body is very important. Stand up, sit down, stay in your seat, stay in your bed, stay in your cell. Only take a half-hour break. You may think of Louis Althusser's ideological state apparatuses. Schools, in particular, are the preeminent model. I have a video on that. Both your movement and your time are enclosed by space and schedule and restricted by the threat of violence from authorities, including teachers, prison guards, or hospital orderlies. In a disciplinary society, you're given the burden of self-discipline, that is, of voluntarily obeying. Show up to the office on time, meet your deadlines, don't undermine your superiors, obey the police. In each case, you have the choice only to regulate yourself or be reprimanded, from getting fired to getting a beatdown. You are expected to burden yourself with responsibility to control where you sit, where you stand, where you walk. Then the state only has to interfere with your life when you're breaking the rules. Now, enter the world of flows. Yeah, that's hype. Now, if you know anything about Deleuze, you know that his world is not one of striated spaces. It's a flow, energies, vectors. Everything's always on its way to something else. And control is no different. You're no longer an individual or a member of a mass of individuals in a space that needs to be disciplined. No, now instead, you're a dividual, which means you're a different source of information depending on which system you're interacting with. So you are made up of different flows of information. To the bank, you are your credit score. To a university, you are an SAT score. To your health insurer, you are your genetic risk factors. To a site like the one you're on right now, You are your watch history. So let me slow down for a minute here. What are we actually looking at? Well, for Deleuze, these are much more common types of institutions in advanced capitalism. Each of these machines collects information about you, and what happens in each case is that you're automatically interpreted, then classified by that data, by the data that a machine has about you and others like you. Then your access to your own future is limited by what they decide. For example, education still has some disciplinary aspects to it, for sure. But more often, the education machine is not about obedience, but about filtering you. If your parents aren't rich, your SAT score determines which tier of education you will have access to, which in turn determines which kind of jobs you have access to, which in turn decides which kinds of lifestyle you will have access to. You're probably not punished for doing poorly in school, but it will cut off access to possible futures. Your SAT score may prove to be your gate into the job market, which more or less determines your social capital ceiling for life. But even getting to this gate has a whole bunch of other access gates that I haven't mentioned, like whether your parents are educated and help you with your homework, if they have time to do that, or if they're able to pay for tutoring for these standardized tests. Control societies manage access to each of these channels. You might be able to guess some of the problems with these types of control.
Dude, it's such an interesting point, because I'm just looking at my own life. And how, even as a young person, I was able to get access to a lot of, relatively elite things like university and so forth, just because of the output of information that I was able to do. And nothing to do with who I really was at all. It's like, you can do this well on this test, you can write this kind of essay, you can do this type of interview and say the right things. That's so interesting. Oh yeah, I wanted to look at this later. I was just curious about this, but I'm going to just put it up for myself for later.
Societies in perpetuating existing inequalities. Similarly, these scores and this other data...
See, this is such an interesting point, what he just said there. Because when they talk about the inegalitarian aspect of capitalism, it's like, what are you talking about? There's opportunity for everybody. Like, the sky's the limit for anybody. It's not true. Because if you don't have the right input and therefore process the information and produce the right output, you do not have access to certain things. What does it take to have what kind of output do you have to access the billionaire class? What kind of filtering mechanisms are put into place to see, like, are you allowed to be there? Makes me think about AI too, because I saw some video of somebody talking about it was like sort of a back and forth about AI, and the one guy was saying something about, he was kind of more on the side that, it's a good thing for society and everything, and there's people who, we're not very good at communicating interpersonally, and they would rub people the wrong way. He said, but then now what they started doing is putting what they want to say through ChatGPT and sending that in the email instead, and now they are getting a lot more opportunities because they're more kind or they're more empathetic within how they communicate. But it's not them communicating, they're just having the AI respond to the person. So it's like, what's the point of the human being, actually? Is our system going to allow every human being to now get access to everything? this is something I had talked about before. Like, if the promise of AI is that it's going to give us super intelligence in everybody's pocket, well, then that means anybody and literally everybody will now become a billionaire, according to that logic. Even though logically that can't happen, because what if everybody on the planet uses their super intelligence in their pocket to become Exxon or Monsanto, or you name it, like some big mega corporation that controls a lot of resources? That's not possible for everybody to do that. So what it looks like to me is there's going to have to be some kind of shift in the system, because it can't just be based on you get access because you can say the right things, because the AI will be able to say it for you. So the system can't allow for that. Maybe it'll just be simplistically the AI systems or the logic behind them. I don't know. How would it determine who gets access to what? It's almost like I can't see any way that the system won't force, like that it can't force. Sorry, that it can't. It's a double negative. It can't not. It has to force a situation where there's like some kind of social credit situation. But that clearly won't be applied universally. Because what's the standard? Like, if you're a good person, if you're benevolent, then you get access to it. But if you're psychopathic, you don't. But I mean, all the fucking billionaires are psychopathic. Just listen to them talk. They're like, I don't think about what I do. I just do it. I don't even think about being a loser. Like, that doesn't even mean anything to me. Like, I just win. I do it. I create. I don't second guess myself. I don't introspect. Okay. So is it okay for everybody to do that, no matter what? Or is there some kind of standard of what's acceptable behavior, what's acceptable to create or not? Because clearly there is. Because if, like, I always go back to the Mark Andreessen case, where it's like, he's clearly complaining in a certain sense about people who want to regulate or do polls that don't represent things accurately. Well, how can you question that? That's just what they want to create. They want to create those polls for some reason because they want that competitive advantage, because they want to win. It's definitely not losers going around creating all these polls. Losers don't do anything. Losers sit on their ass and they're depressed. But somebody who's able to organize vast networks of information and polls to create polling data that misrepresents a situation, that person's not a loser. They're doing something. So what's the standard here? What is the standard by which certain things are okay and certain things aren't okay? If we're not doing any introspection, like, what's the standard? Is it just a might makes right? Like, well, I have access to it and I can block you because I had access before you. I owned it before you did, so it's mine and I can do what the fuck I want. Is that the standard we're going to go by? I mean, it's been the standard this whole time, I suppose.
Determines your ability to borrow money for health coverage, and on social media they prohibit you from calling me a in the comments because your comment will be automatically filtered out. See, you're not disciplined for calling me a but your access to commenting on other videos may be automatically restricted by these machines. And what's significant here is that you're not expected to be a good person. You're not expected to self-discipline.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, because I don't have like an inflated sense of, you know, I'm like an amazing communicator. I'm an amazing entertainer or something. I don't have that. But I look at a lot of the people who are popular and I'm like, they're not doing anything fucking special. And so it makes me wonder, like, this, like, what puts, it's like, I mean, this guy's put a lot of effort into his video, like, well done. So I could see why he would get some views on it. But it just makes you wonder, like, are certain things limited because of what you've said? You know, the fact that you're challenging certain things. I don't know. Maybe that's just a paranoia, but clearly there are algorithms deciding what gets pushed out and what doesn't. I mean, if you just go onto Kick, which obviously if you're listening to this, well, on Kick Live, you are on Kick right now, but if you were to go separately and go onto the main page and look at what's promoted as the top streams, it's just stupid. It's like, I mean, look, let's see if I can just do it right now, because I'm not logged in on, oh wait, I am logged in here. It shouldn't matter though. Look. Trying fast food in real life. There's a guy, I'm gonna assume he's vacuuming his floor. Here's a guy playing a video game. Here's a person grocery shopping. Only 153 people watching that though. 152 watching. This may not be like a high traffic time, I don't know. There's some slots and casinos, 5,500. Here's a guy playing a video game, 15,000, 16,000 people watching. Slots and casinos, video games. I mean, this guy's just putting on clothing or something. I don't know.
Because it's all going to happen automatically. Now, I'm sure some of you are creative enough to figure out ways to get around it, but let's please not try to do that. While we definitely still have disciplinary systems around us, we are increasingly in a society of control. The world is becoming more and more automated, which allows for... There's one specialized word I'd like to introduce you to, because it sums up how control systems do their controlling. Control machines steer your actions, qua data, into channels. Now, as soon as I say the word steer, there's a brave new world to discover. Cybernetics. Now, I don't know what you think cybernetics means, because there's a lot of offshoots from the original word. The whole word family of cyberspace, cyborg, cyberpunk is a...
I just got in the mail a book. I think it's called Cybernetics, or it's about cybernetics, but it's like the guy who created the whole theory. I think his name's Wiener.
Sometimes misleading offshoot of this word. The word was actually coined first...
I think it's that book exactly.
...by a guy named Norbert Wiener. Its etymology is from the Greek word, this one, keverneo, or in Greek, to steer, as in steering a trireme. For Wiener, cybernetic systems are those that function by feedback, and they use feedback loops to interpret information and eliminate deviation over time. Feedback is an important word. It maintains a given pattern. The difference between this pattern and the actually performed motion is used as a new input to cause the part regulated to move in such a way as to bring its motion closer to that given by the pattern. All right, so this might seem like word salad, but a thermostat is the simplest example of a cybernetic machine. It gets feedback from the environment over time in the form of temperature. If the feedback from the environment is that the temperature is too cold, the thermostat will turn on the heat until it reaches the level that it's set to, and at that point it will turn it off. The pattern it's trying to maintain here is that temperature that you set your thermostat to. So if a thermostat uses feedback to control the temperature of a room, what is it that our social cybernetic machines control? People steering machines, behavior steering machines. And this is what Deleuze is talking about: capital, health, information. These control societies don't force you to do anything, but as soon as you offer them information, they offer their feedback, which is then used to steer or adjust your behavior. Usually this means placing you in a spending demographic or a risk category. With further feedback, you can refine your placements as an individual into these societies of control. Large-scale data mining and the algorithms that learn from these data sets give whoever owns that data access to the future. Control societies are designed to create the future, including your future. They are future machines. And they don't just decide what the future is. They mine you, channel you, and steer you into the future their designers designed them to create. This is only a partial glimpse into the operations of real forces that are already producing what we will become. It's the reason that the world's most valuable companies are data companies. That data is subject to these cybernetic mechanisms, which are future generating machines. And speaking of future generating machines, I'd like to thank Matt Epoch for.
Well, I was hoping he'd go further into that point, but that's interesting. Post-human futurology. Someone said, I wouldn't have minded if this was 6 hours longer. What is this thing? Anti-natalist? Oh man, that's a whole rabbit hole. A non-fiction book, better known as horror fiction, but is nonfiction, offers a series of essays on his philosophical pessimism, nihilist, and anti-natalist views. Guattari assumes a pessimistic outlook from the outset, starting assumption the premise that being alive is not all right, or that in general suffering outweighs pleasure. The more conscious one is of the meaningless and often horrifying nature of the world, which is referred to as being malignantly useless, the more one wishes not to be aware of this fact, and so overly conscious beings must constantly engage in exercises which limit their awareness of the negative aspects of existence. This makes consciousness something that should not be, and humanity's attempts at either coping with, ignoring, or actively suppressing this factor have a significant portion of modern society's obsessions, such as the quest for healthy living, art and horror, acts of sublimation. Few people would be willing to be born in the past. Very few people feel bad about being alive in the present, despite the strong possibility that future generations will feel the same about us that we feel towards the past. Kind of defeats your argument, but... Jeez. Collaborated with the Current 93. That is a very weird group. Listen to some of their stuff. Anhedonia. Sounds interesting, though. Oh, look, Mark Fisher. Described conspiracy as amateur philosophy in the best possible sense, driven by a metaphysical hunger that is so often lacking in the work of professional philosophers. Interesting. Mark Fisher, that's this book we were just reading from. It's so weird how that all connects. I mean, I guess not that weird considering I'm looking up stuff based on this, but... Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Gosh, I keep doing it. There we go. Very interesting. Okay. I think that's all for tonight. Very interesting stuff. Let's see. Tonight's Wednesday, so tomorrow, Thursday, 8:30 p.m., same time as usual. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night. See you next time.